Hey guys, tonight we slip our sandals into the muddy banks of the Tiber River, where a pair of abandoned twins is about to rewrite world history. Though you probably won't survive this if you keep underestimating just how many gods, geese, and gossip are lurking in ancient Rome's origin stories. You stand barefoot in the reeds, half expecting a wolf's growl behind you. Two tiny, squirming boys lie in a woven basket, miraculously afloat on the sluggish Tiber. You already know their names, Romulus and Remus, living proof that Romans always preferred an epic backstory to a dull census record. The she-wolf who finds them doesn't bother with baby talk. She nurses them like pups, ensuring no polite cradle will dull their edges. By the time a shepherd discovers these wild children under a fig tree, they're halfway feral and more at ease with snarls than lullabies. As you shadow them through the muddy huts of early Latium, every step squelches in the swampy ground. Rome's future feels laughably fragile, just scattered huts on 7 lumps of earth, constantly bickering with neighbors over cattle raids and petty insults. Still, a spark flickers every time the twins wrestle on Palatine Hill, tumbling through scrubby bushes while debating whose name this fledgling city should bear. Spoiler: Romulus wins, Remus ends up stabbed or clubbed. Historians still argue whether he was collateral damage or a sacrifice to ambition. Your nostrils catch smoke from a tiny shrine dedicated to household gods. These early Romans are suspicious folk. Every door has a protective charm, every hearth a spirit to bribe. They believe city walls keep out not just raiders, but vengeful spirits and family grudges. You'd laugh, but later emperors keep that same paranoia. Turns out a little superstition helps when ruling stubborn humans. At dawn, you squint at Romulus laying out Rome's sacred boundary with a bronze plough. He chants oaths, flips clumps of earth, and promises that any fool who hops this furrow without permission deserves a quick death. Naturally, Remus tests this new rule because what are brothers for? One scuffle later, the city has its first homicide and its first divine warning. Rome will forever devour its own children. Yet Rome needs more than walls and blood to survive. It needs people. Romulus invites every runaway, misfit, and unwashed miscreant from surrounding hills. This city is a magnet for troublemakers and dreamers, a tradition you'll see echo again when Caesar's gangs and Augustus poets flood its streets. Want a wife, though? Sorry, the locals aren't keen to marry their daughters to Rome's riffraff. Solution? Hold a festival, get the neighbors drunk, and then, yes, abduct the Sabine women mid-dance. It's as awkward as it sounds, but somehow, these kidnappings morph into real marriages. Historians still argue whether the Sabine wives were hostages or Rome's first peacemakers, forging alliances with their new baby bumps. Under these early kings, Rome's identity swells like a bruised eye. Romulus vanishes in a storm, or maybe assassins chopped him up and blamed the gods, who knows. After him, a medley of kings, some Latin, some Etruscan, build Rome's first sewers, temples, and the iconic Circus Maximus, where horses thunder past cheering mobs. You lean against a rough stone pillar, ears buzzing with gossip about King Tarquin the Proud. He's the last straw, arrogant, cruel, and more likely to execute rivals than negotiate treaties. Even the gods roll their eyes. By now, the city pulses with new blood and old grudges. Market stalls groan with olive oil amphorae, clay lamps flicker in cramped taverns, and rumours about royal misdeeds swirl faster than Tiber's currents. Rome's citizens, emboldened by centuries of backstabbing kings, quietly sharpen their knives. Political ones for now. You feel it in the air. The monarchy's days are numbered. But Rome's appetite for power games is only beginning. Before you tiptoe toward the next chapter, here's a tidbit you might drop at parties. To keep skin, sunburn free, Romans, legend says, sometimes slathered themselves with crocodile dung. Call it ancient SPF, call it desperate skincare, but you can't deny their commitment to style. So clutch your lucky amulet a little tighter and keep your sandals dry. Rome's swampy start is nothing compared to the storms brewing in its senate. You stand wedged between 2 bickering senators under the shade of a crooked olive tree. Their tunics smell faintly of goat cheese and old grudges, fitting since you're about to witness Rome's grand experiment, swapping kings for collective rule. After Tarquin the Proud's final stunt, his son's vile crime and the royal family's indifference, Rome's patience shatters. The people roar for change, and when Romans roar, you better plug your ears or grab a dagger. Out goes the monarchy, replaced by something no one can quite define yet, the Republic. It sounds noble, doesn't it? Public affair, they brag. But watch your purse. Most of these patricians care more about lining their villas with Greek statues than safeguarding freedom. Still, they carve 2 new offices, consuls, 2 men, 1-year terms, mutual veto. In theory, this keeps tyranny at bay. In practice, you'll see more tantrums than teamwork. You trail behind the first consuls. Brutus, not that Brutus, his great-whatever grandson stabs Caesar later. And Collatinus, as they parade Rome's new pride through dusty streets. A bronze axe bundled with rods, the fasces, symbolizes their power to punish and execute. Hold tight to that image. Centuries later, it still appears on American dimes and fascist propaganda alike. Rome never really dies. It just rebrands. Outside the city walls, Rome's neighbors smirk. Kick out your kings. Cute. They attack immediately, convinced this squabbling republic will fold like wet parchment. But you watch ragged farmers morph into soldiers overnight. Rome's uncanny knack for improvising armies becomes a habit. With wooden shields and iron resolve, they hurl back Etruscans, Sabines, and Volscians, securing the young republic's shaky borders. Inside the walls, it's chaos. The patricians, old noble families, hog power and land, squeezing the poorer plebeians until even the pigs look better fed. You eavesdrop on riots in the forum, where plebs brandish pitchforks demanding debt relief, fair laws, and a voice in decisions. This tension boils over so often that a special office emerges, the tribune of the plebs. Think of them as Rome's early ombudsmen, sacred protectors who can yell veto if the Senate overreaches. Historians still argue whether the plebs' secessions, when they literally march out and refuse to work, were grassroots democracy or early union strikes. Either way, it works. Reforms trickle in. The 12 tables, Rome's first written laws, harsh but public. Debt limits, and a slow creep toward political rights for the common man. Meanwhile, Rome's elders sip watered wine in the Senate House, crafting new rules to balance ambition and fear. One checks the other, like toddlers with sharp knives. If a consul gets too big for his sandals, the Senate can appoint a dictator. 6 months, absolute power, then back to the farm. Of course, power loves to linger. This loophole will haunt Rome when Caesar gets ideas. But for now, the balance mostly holds. While the Republic's government matures, its social life is delightfully messy. You squeeze into a grimy tavern near the forum, ducking sloshed apprentices and gossiping matrons. Romans gamble with dice, bicker over chariot teams, and curse neighbours in creative Latin. Marriage customs remain a circus. Dowries exchanged, wives technically property. But clever Roman women bend rules, managing households, manipulating alliances, and sometimes discreetly running their lovers' political careers. In this whirl of brawls and debates, the Roman character forms, suspicious of kings, obsessed with honour, scornful of luxury, yet addicted to foreign trinkets. They slap rough laurel crowns on their heroes and hurl them aside the moment pride oversteps humility. Today's war hero is tomorrow's exile. You'll see this again and again. Success is Rome's deadliest poison. Among the ordinary folk, odd rituals persist. Need divine advice before suing your neighbour? Consult a chicken. Sacred chickens kept in cages, pet grain to signal the gods' favour or disdain. Roman augurs stand nearby, dead serious, reading pigeon flight paths like stock charts. You chuckle now, but next time the city panics, everyone eyes the birds. As the Republic ages, new alliances spread its influence wider than any single city-state before it. You overhear senators fret about Latin League uprisings, Etruscan intrigues, and rebellious hill tribes that won't stay conquered. Each victory binds Rome tighter. More roads, colonies, and outposts dot the map. The once humble village on 7 hills now stirs like a lion testing its roar. One mainstream fact: the Roman Republic lasted nearly 5 centuries, an endurance feat unmatched by other city-states that flared and vanished within decades. One quirky nugget before you shuffle to the next scene: Rome's sacred geese, kept in the temple of Juno, once saved the city by honking wildly during a Gaulish sneak attack. You'd think elite sentries would do the job, but no, honour goes to some angry birds. So clutch your veto rights, avoid unpaid debts, and keep an eye on the chickens. The Republic's foundation is set, but the storm clouds of foreign wars are already rolling over the hills. You feel the earth tremble beneath hobnailed sandals as Rome's fledgling republic flexes muscles it didn't know it had. One hill fort, then another, Soon your calloused feet march past conquered Samnite villages, charred gates swinging on rusted hinges. It's survival by expansion. Either crush the neighbors or risk being devoured by them. And so, Rome learns to fight, then learns to win. You trail behind Rome's legions as they scrap endlessly with the Samnites, stubborn mountain folk who know every goat path and ambush site from Capua to the Apennines. These wars rage for decades, each treaty a brief pause before swords clash again. You catch yourself humming to drown out the clash of iron and the grunt of wounded men dragged on makeshift litters. Historians still argue whether Rome's tactics evolved by genius or pure dumb luck. Switching from rigid Greek-style phalanxes to the more flexible manipular formation gave Rome its tactical edge. Between battles, life trudges on. A soldier might leave his plough for years, returning to find creditors at the gate and his family half-starved. Rome's solution: conquer more farmland, distribute some to loyal veterans, and keep them too busy planting barley to stir up trouble in the forum. It works, mostly. While Rome wrestles the Samnites, another storm brews from across the sea. Look south. There's Carthage, queen of the western Mediterranean, its merchants growing rich on purple dye, and trade routes that wrap the known world like an octopus. You hitch a ride on a creaking trireme, sea spray stinging your eyes as Roman envoys awkwardly negotiate with Carthaginian admirals. Friendly alliances? Sure, until Sicily tempts both with its sun-drenched grain fields and prime naval harbours. The First Punic War ignites like dry tinder. Rome, a land power, must become a navy overnight. You watch farm boys learn to row and catapult stones at Phoenician decks. They even copy a wrecked Carthaginian ship piece by piece, a delightful cheat code in a brutal sea fight. The Corvus, a spiked boarding bridge, turns sea battles into infantry brawls, playing to Roman strengths and Carthaginian horror. Your nights on campaign taste of salted fish, stale wine, and fear of hidden reefs. Yet Rome claws victory from stubborn jaws, snatching Sicily and the illusion of a peaceful horizon. But you know better. Carthage licks its wounds, seeds of revenge taking root in a brilliant young general named Hannibal Barca. Years later, you trudge through the Alps at his side. Yes, you're freezing, half-starved, and staring at elephants with frost-crusted hides. This is the Second Punic War, the moment when Hannibal's daring redefines audacity. He leads his war beasts over icy passes like some half-mad mountain god, landing behind Roman lines where no one expects him. Roman generals panic, senators bite fingernails down to the quick, and you hide behind your battered shield as Hannibal delivers a masterclass at Cannae. Double envelopment, 60,000 Romans dead in a single sun-scorched afternoon. To this day, military academies drool over that maneuver. Historians still argue whether Rome's resilience or Hannibal's caution cost him the final blow against the city itself. But Rome is a hydra. Cut off a legion, and two more grow. You witness the Senate pour fresh recruits into the meat grinder, learning from each bruising defeat. Young Scipio Africanus rises like a phoenix, flipping the war by striking Carthage's home turf. At Zama, Scipio's cavalry flanks crush Hannibal's last stand. Carthage, humiliated, signs terms that hobble its navy and treasury for good. You'd think Rome would savour this peace, but empire is a hungry belly. Between skirmishes, you wander Rome's dirt roads, marvelling at war spoils paraded through the forum. Exotic animals, golden masks, chained captives muttering curses in a dozen languages. These triumphs make every sweaty skirmish feel worthwhile, until you glimpse the underbelly. Slaves hauled to quarries, taxes swelling senator coffers, and grumbling farmers who can't compete with plantations run on shackled labour. One mainstream fact. At its peak, the Punic Wars cost Rome hundreds of thousands of lives and nearly bankrupted its coffers, yet forged an unshakable confidence in its right to rule the known world. And a strange tidbit for the road. Roman soldiers sometimes carried lucky phallic charms called fascinum. Yes, tiny bronze penises on strings. They swore these warded off evil. Feel free to raise an eyebrow. With Carthage humbled and the Mediterranean glittering under Roman sails, you wipe the sweat from your brow and brace your knees. Expansion is intoxicating. Ask any senator counting new provinces. But each new conquest plants seeds of civil strife, corruption, and egos too large for a Senate hall to contain. So keep your sword sharp and your purse closer. The next march won't just be through foreign soil, but through the crumbling illusions of a republic too big for its old sandals. Your sandals scuff marble steps now instead of muddy hillsides. Rome's appetite has turned the entire Mediterranean into its personal pond, and you drift through it on grain ships heavy with African wheat and Greek statues, spoils of conquest that feed bellies and egos in equal measure. With Carthage shackled and Greece toppled, Rome inherits more than just land. You pause in Athens' crumbling agora, listening to Roman officers recite bits of Plato between bribes. Greek tutors flood patrician households, teaching little senators to be how to conjugate verbs while their fathers hire mercenaries to conquer more provinces. It's a delightful contradiction. Rome, the brawny soldier, wearing Greece's philosopher's hat. Meanwhile, back home, the forum hums like an anthill after a rainstorm. Senators argue beneath awnings draped to block the sun. Slaves fan their masters, and the smell of fresh fish mixes with oaths hurled at corrupt tax collectors. You lean on a column, watching ambitious nobles, men like Pompey and Crassus, buy loyalty with feasts and favours. Bread and circuses keep the mob too entertained to revolt, or so they hope. In your wanderings, you pass sprawling villas dotting Italy's countryside. These latifundia, megafarms run on slave labour, squeeze out small farmers who trickle into Rome begging for work or lining up for free grain. This swelling urban underclass forms a powder keg beneath Rome's polished marble. Historians still argue whether the Republic's greed or sheer scale doomed it first. While the rich bathe in perfumed pools and gossip about orgies that may or may not have happened, the military becomes Rome's true backbone. Veterans demand land, generals deliver it, in exchange for undying loyalty. You overhear centurions swear by their commander's name, rather than the Senate's decrees. It's subtle treason dressed in patriotism. A quirk of conquest. Exotic pets become status symbols. Peacocks strut through courtyards. Wealthy matrons fuss over pet monkeys who throw figs at unsuspecting dinner guests. You sidestep one such monkey on your way to a political rally. Rome's streets are never dull. Across the sea, Egypt, the jewel of the East, sends grain shipments so vast they'd starve 1 million Romans if delayed. Ptolemies lounge on golden thrones, flattered by Roman envoys who pretend it's diplomacy when really it's economic blackmail. You drift along the Nile under a moonlit sky, imagining the day Rome will annex even this last gleaming prize outright. Yet under all this wealth simmers discontent. Pirates infest trade routes. Local uprisings flare in Spain and Judea. Tax farmers squeeze provinces until rebellion seems cheaper than compliance. Still, Rome shrugs, raises another legion, and stamps out flames before they spread. One mainstream fact. By the mid-1st century, BCE, Rome controlled territories stretching from Spain to Syria, a feat of administration unmatched until modern empires centuries later. You pause in the Senate House again, watching old patricians with watery eyes scold younger firebrands. One scowls at the mention of Spartacus, the gladiator who led a slave revolt so terrifying that even hardened centurions whisper about it after dark. Imagine an ex-gladiator nearly unseating an empire. Rome crucified 6,000 along the Appian Way as a warning, yet the institution of slavery marches on, more vital than ever. Outside the city, Rome's roads grow like veins across a marble giant, stone paths so precise that today's engineers still marvel. You squint at mile markers counting the empire's reach in footsteps. Merchants trudge by with silk from the east, amphorae of garum, that stinky fermented fish sauce Romans love, and rumours of barbarians massing beyond the Rhine. One curious custom sticks with you. When a victorious general parades through Rome in a triumph, a slave stands behind him, whispering, "Memento mori." Remember you are mortal. Even in the Republic's swagger, someone must remind the mighty they're just future dust. At dusk, you slip into an amphitheatre. Gladiators clash for roaring crowds, blood mingling with spilled wine and chewed garum bits. You wonder, watching a Mamillo lift his battered shield, if Rome's obsession with spectacle masks the cracks in its walls. Historians still argue whether this conquest-driven boom was sustainable or an inevitable prelude to civil war. You'll see soon enough, senators bribed, mobs swayed, generals hoarding power like dragons hoard gold. So rest your feet for now, but don't get too comfortable. Rome's hunger won't stop at Carthage or Greece or even Egypt. Next up, its own soul is on the chopping block, sold to the highest bidder in the Senate or on the battlefield. You wake to shouts echoing off red-tiled roofs. The Republic, once a farmers' council of equals, now teeters under the weight of its own appetite. While senators polish marble busts of their ancestors, Common folk sleep crammed in tenement blocks, dreaming of debt relief that never comes. Through the dusty streets, you follow Tiberius Gracchus, patrician with a dangerous idea. He strides into the forum, toga fluttering, demanding Rome return stolen land to poor citizens. The crowd roars approval. The Senate whispers treason. Rome's laws favor the rich. Tiberius wants to rewrite them with passion and populist charm. He gets a few plots redistributed before senators club him to death on the Capitol steps. That escalated quickly. Undeterred, his brother Gaius picks up the torch. He expands the grain dole, challenges corrupt judges, and dreams of citizenship for Italy's allies. You stand on the rostra as he rouses the people, promising justice. The Senate, cornered, spreads rumors, bribes street gangs, and when blood flows, sends an armed force to corner Gaius on a hill. He orders a slave to kill him first. Better that than the Senate's mercy. Historians still argue whether the Gracchi were idealists, opportunists, or martyrs in a system rigged to break them. These brothers crack the illusion that Rome's republic is stable. Now, ambitious men learn. Sway the mob, you rule the city. You can't help but notice the forum feels more like a powder keg than a temple of civic virtue. Next up, Gaius Marius, a new type of power broker. Not an aristocrat swanning around the Senate house. This man is a soldier's soldier. He reforms the legions, throwing open the ranks to Rome's poorest. No land? No problem. Sign up, win battles, and get farmland as thanks. Clever trick. Loyalty shifts from the state to the general, who promises that plot of dirt and a pension. You trail Marius through Numidian sands and German forests, where he forges battle-hardened legions that fear no barbarian. He's elected consul again and again and again, smashing old term limits. Temporary emergency, he shrugs, as if Rome doesn't notice the Republic's guardrails buckling. The Senate grumbles, but does nothing. After all, he wins wars, and Rome loves winners. A quirky tidbit to brag about. Marius standardizes soldiers' kit so much that legionaries start calling themselves Marius mules, pack animals burdened with gear but fiercely proud of their heavy loads. Rome's soldiers march faster and strike harder because of this stubborn donkey mindset. Yet while Marius conquers abroad, civil chaos brews at home. Corrupt magistrates, rigged elections, and street gangs hired by rival senators turn the city into a boxing ring. You dodge a thrown brick as Clodius's thugs brawl with Milo's henchmen over control of key intersections. Picture a mafia turf war, but in togas. And then Sulla enters stage left, a patrician general with icy eyes and a score to settle with Marius. Their feud cracks the Republic wide open. You watch in disbelief as Sulla does the unthinkable. He marches his legions on Rome itself. Romans killing Romans. Temples echoing with screams. Marble floors slick with betrayal. He purges enemies, scribbles their names on bloody prescription lists, and seizes wealth to reward allies. Historians still argue whether Sulla's dictatorship was Rome's death knell or just a grim bandage on a festering wound. When he retires to his villa, bragging he restored the Republic, everyone pretends to believe him. But the genie's out. Once generals learn they can seize power at sword point, the Senate's old dignity looks laughably fragile. Amid this turmoil, Rome's provinces chafe under greedy tax farmers and absentee landlords. You eavesdrop in dusty taverns. Local elites curse Rome while local rebels plot. Meanwhile, pirates swarm the Mediterranean, snatching merchant ships and ransoming senators' nephews for obscene sums. One mainstream fact. By this era, the Senate governed an empire of millions, with no modern bureaucracy. Just governors, bribes, and occasional legions to scare people straight. It was efficient if you ignored the chaos bubbling under every province's surface. Here's a morbid curiosity. Some desperate Romans turned to magical curses. Tiny lead tablets inscribed with hateful pleas to underworld spirits, then nailed to temple walls or tossed into wells. A primitive yelp for revenge. By the end of your stroll through these decades, you realize this once proud republic runs on bribes, violence, and borrowed loyalty. Its grand Senate debates mask ugly street brawls. Its marble facades hide starving peasants and scheming generals. So cinch your cloak tighter and keep your head down. Because next, you'll meet a brash young aristocrat named Julius Caesar, who watches this mess and thinks, I can do it better. And spoiler, he just might. You jostle through a restless crowd on the rough cobbles of Rome's Subura district, all eyes peering up at a lean young noble, delivering a speech that feels more like a promise wrapped in honey. Julius Caesar, his name drips from every gossip's tongue, a blend of charm, scandal, and sheer, infuriating ambition. You can almost smell history catching fire. Caesar starts modestly, a flashy lawyer, a notorious party boy, a magnet for debts so large even the wealthiest lenders lose sleep. But watch him move. He borrows, flatters, seduces, and even kidnaps pirates to secure his rising star. Yes, pirates. Once captured off the Aegean coast, Caesar jokes with his captors, promises he'll crucify them when ransomed, and then actually does it. Historians still argue whether he did it out of vengeance or sheer PR flair. Back in Rome, the Senate chuckles at this pretty boy senator, with his endless spending sprees and sly alliances. But Caesar's smart enough to ally with Crassus, the richest man in Rome, and Pompey the Great, hero of the East. Together, they forge the so-called First Triumvirate. 3 egos too big for any marble hall. You slip between their shadows as they carve up Rome's offices, provinces, and riches like a birthday cake nobody else is invited to taste. But Caesar wants more than a slice. He eyes Gaul, that wild expanse bristling with tribes and druids whispering to sacred oak groves. With Senate approval and secret bribes, he marches north. What follows is part genocide, part glory. You tramp behind legions who build fortifications overnight and hurl pilum javelins into forests thick with Celtic war cries. One mainstream fact. By the end of his campaigns, Caesar claims to have killed or enslaved over 1 million Gauls. Numbers might be inflated. Romans do love big headlines, but the scale is terrifyingly real. Between battles, Caesar scribbles dispatches, his commentaries, painting himself as Rome's greatest hero, a man against barbarian chaos. These dispatches circulate like bestsellers. Back home, the mob worships him, the Senate squirms. His enemies whisper, he's too popular, too powerful. You sneak through his camp one misty dawn, ears pricked to gossip from grizzled centurions. They swear loyalty to Caesar the man, not the Republic. They build bridges over raging rivers in days, plunder Germanic villages, and return richer and hungrier for adventure. They are his instrument and his shield. Meanwhile, back in Rome, Pompey grows uneasy. His wife Julia, Caesar's beloved daughter, dies in childbirth. Their family bond snaps like dry twine. Crassus tries to balance this awkward marriage of power by launching a vain war in Parthia. He loses miserably. His head ends up a prop in a Parthian play. Without him, the triumvirate crumbles. Rome, ever allergic to stability, spirals. Senators push Caesar to relinquish his legions and return as an ordinary citizen. Caesar smirks. He knows what happened to Marius and Sulla's enemies. So you stand beside him at the Rubicon River, an icy stream marking the point of no return. He mutters the line everyone remembers. Alea jacta est. The die is cast. With that, Caesar's boot crosses the water, and the Republic's last illusions drown behind him. As he marches on Rome, senators scatter like pigeons before a wolfhound. Pompey flees to Greece, gathering a ragtag resistance. You trail Caesar through towns that swing open gates rather than fight. His soldiers adore him. The people hail him as savior from corrupt elites. Some call it civil war. Caesar calls it restoration. At Pharsalus, Greece's plains choke on dust and blood as Caesar's lean, loyal veterans outmaneuver Pompey's bloated force. When victory is certain, you see Pompey slip away to Egypt, hoping for royal sanctuary. He gets a blade to the neck instead, courtesy of Egypt's jittery rulers. Here's a quirky fact. When Caesar arrives and sees Pompey's severed head, he reportedly weeps. Historians still argue if it was sincere grief or political theatre. Regardless, Caesar promptly meddles in Egypt's dynastic mess, because why not? He backs Cleopatra, a brilliant queen who knows how to twist a Roman's heart and policies alike. Soon enough, Caesar lounges on Nile barges, sailing with Cleopatra and her fragrant court while Rome simmers in confusion. But the Republic refuses to die quietly. Back in Rome, senators grumble that Caesar's new titles, dictator for life, father of the fatherland, reek of monarchy. He parades through triumphs, reforms the calendar, hello July, fills the Senate with loyalists, and offends traditionalists by brushing aside old taboos. He even wears red boots, rumoured to mimic the ancient kings he once claimed to despise. As you stand near the theatre of Pompey on the Ides of March, the tension thickens like storm clouds before a summer downpour. Friends, enemies, and backstabbers alike cluster around Caesar under the dome's soft light. Knives flash, a toga darkens with blood, and the man who conquered Gaul gasps at Brutus, et tu, before crumpling to marble. The great irony. In killing Caesar to save the Republic, they doom both. Rome now knows power cannot be stuffed back in senatorial robes. Some will always grasp it with a general's sword. So brush the marble dust off your sandals. From these scattered knives rises another storm, because this civil war isn't over. It's just getting started. You stand in the torchlit alleys near the Curia, the smell of blood still clinging to the Senate steps where Caesar fell. Rome buzzes like a hornet nest kicked by a drunk god. Some celebrate the tyrant's death, others weep, and many watch the sky, wondering which vulture will claim the prize next. In this chaotic hush, Mark Antony steps forward. You shadow him as he approaches Caesar's cooling corpse, lifts the toga, and shows the rent wounds to a howling crowd. He promises revenge draped in eloquence. Nobody stirs a Roman mob like Antony does when he wants to be theatrical. Historians still argue whether his funeral oration was heartfelt grief or calculated power play. Probably both. Meanwhile, a skinny, sickly teenager with Caesar's blood humming in his veins arrives from the backwaters. Meet Gaius Octavius, known soon enough as Augustus to you, but for now he's just a cunning heir, claiming what his adoptive father left him. The loyalty of veterans, a mountain of debts, and Rome's deepest suspicions. You watch Octavian, barely out of boyhood, maneuver with chilling poise. He teams up with Antony and Lepidus, forming the second triumvirate, Rome's new strongmen, ready to avenge Caesar and slice up the Republic like stale bread. Together, they purge enemies in a political bloodbath. Names etched on prescription lists flutter in the forum breeze. You flinch as bounty hunters drag old senators from shrines, and their heads soon decorating rostrums where free speech once ruled. The Republic, for all its pomp, is now a graveyard for old freedoms. You follow the triumvirs east, where the last assassins of Caesar, Brutus and Cassius, marshal armies in a desperate stand. At Philippi, dusty plains turn red as Antony's cavalry outflanks Brutus, who, seeing the end, falls on his own sword beneath a foreign sun. A mainstream fact, this battle marks the real death knell of the Republic. No Senate can check men backed by entire legions. Yet the alliance cracks almost before the blood dries. Lepidus, the forgettable third wheel, gets sidelined to Africa, politically alive but irrelevant. Antony drifts to Egypt, drawn like a moth to Cleopatra's candles in her golden barge. Rome gossips about their scandalous feasts, jeweled couches, pearls dissolved in wine, lovers playing gods and goddesses while senators gnash teeth in the forum. Back home, Octavian pretends to restore old values. He marries the right women, banishes scandal from his public face, and whispers that Antony is no true Roman, just another Eastern despot in bed with a foreign queen. You watch Octavian churn propaganda like wine. He's pious, he's sober, he loves his wife, publicly anyway. Rome laps it up. You stand on a rocky shore as the final showdown brews at Actium. Octavian's fleet, led by Agrippa, his bulldog admiral, boxes in Antony and Cleopatra's grand ships, their sails heavy with treasure and last hopes. As arrows darken the sea breeze, Cleopatra flees first, Antony follows, and the battle is lost before it truly begins. Their end is anticlimactic. Cornered in Alexandria, Antony falls on his sword in a botched attempt at noble suicide. Cleopatra, legend says, presses a venomous asp to her skin, though historians still argue whether it was poison or Roman dagger that did her in. One quirky fact. After Cleopatra's death, Octavian parades her children through Rome in chains, except Caesarion, Caesar's supposed son, whom he discreetly has killed. No rival bloodlines left to sprout trouble, cold but effective. Returning to Rome, Octavian stands alone, master of a broken republic nobody wants to fix anymore. He closes temple doors to claim he's ended civil wars, reforms coinage, expands roads, and seduces the Senate into handing him absolute power wrapped in republican costume. He takes a new name, Augustus, princeps, first citizen. Not king, no. Romans hate that word. But if you squint, you see the crown anyway, glittering behind laurel wreaths and modest titles. One mainstream fact. Augustus rules longer than any leader before him. Over 40 years of mostly stable, prosperous rule. Under him, the Republic is a corpse embalmed in marble. The Senate debates politely, but obeys. The people feast and cheer. The legions stay loyal so long as grain ships arrive on time. Under Augustus, poets like Virgil write epics about Rome's divine destiny. Roads stretch like veins to the empire's edges. Marble replaces brick. Temples gleam in sunlight. and the Pax Romana, Rome's greatest PR spin, takes root. But you, clever listener, sense the irony. All this glory rests on what the old senators once feared most, a single man's word. Beneath Augustus' calm reforms hums a lesson. Rome doesn't need a republic. It needs peace, prosperity, and bread, delivered warm to the insular stairwells. So wrap your toga tighter and breathe in this illusion of rebirth. The empire stands gleaming for now. But it's only human, and all humans eventually crack. You lean against a cool marble pillar outside Augustus's modest villa, eavesdropping as senators praise the new princeps with words so syrupy they'd rot your teeth if spoken aloud too often. Augustus wears plain clothes, walks with careful dignity, and swears he's just the first citizen, not a king. You smile into your sleeve because you, more than anyone, know a crowned fox when you see one. This so-called restoration of the Republic is theatre. Real power hums in private chambers, in quiet letters sealed with imperial wax. Augustus keeps the legions fed, the provinces quiet, and the streets clean. Rome, tired of riots and civil war, happily trades liberty for the steady supply of Egyptian grain and chariot races at the Circus Maximus. And oh, the circus. This is where the common folk pour out their lungs cheering for charioteers in flashy colours. Blue versus green, red versus white. Sometimes the rivalries spark street brawls so wild they look like mini-civil wars themselves. You duck a flying cabbage hurled at an unlucky senator who dared support the wrong team. Under Augustus's reign, the city transforms from brick to marble. You stroll the gleaming Forum of Augustus, lined with statues of Rome's ancestors, each one whispering that Rome was always destined to rule everything it touches. Temples rise, aqueducts stretch like stone skeletons across hills, public baths steam with gossip. A mainstream fact. By the time Augustus dies, Rome is the world's largest city, with over 1 million souls jammed together beneath tiled rooftops and terracotta drainpipes. Yet even the steadiest emperor must worry about what comes next. Augustus has no surviving sons, just stepchildren, and a slippery list of heirs who keep dying of convenient coughs or military mishaps. You hover by his bedside as he whispers to loyal friends, polishing his legacy like a precious coin while the next generation sharpens knives behind velvet curtains. Enter Tiberius, his reluctant heir, grim, capable, and about as cuddly as a scorpion in a sandal. He doesn't pretend to love the Senate, he tolerates it. You shuffle behind him to the island of Capri, where he holes up in cliffside villas. Rumours swirl, orgies, spies, unspeakable games. Historians still argue whether Tiberius was truly monstrous or just a moody hermit trying to escape Rome's backstabbers. Tiberius leaves behind a powder keg named Caligula, nickname for Little Boot, given to him by soldiers when he was a toddler playing in camp. At first, the people adore him. Parades, tax cuts, games galore. Then a nasty fever scrambles his wits. What sanity he had leaks out like wine from a cracked amphora. He declares himself a living god, talks to the moon, and plans to make his horse, Incitatus, a consul. Whether he was serious or just trolling the Senate, nobody's quite sure. But the senators plot until Caligula meets a sticky end in a palace hallway. Rome sighs with relief and drags his uncle Claudius from behind a curtain. Literally. The stammering, drooling uncle everyone mocked turns out to be oddly clever. He expands the empire into Britain, builds harbours, reforms courts. You trail him through misty Londinium as puzzled Celtic tribes gawk at Roman forts sprouting overnight. But family drama clings like olive oil. His wife Messalina runs wild with lovers until she's caught and executed. His next wife, Agrippina, is more ambitious still. She feeds him poisoned mushrooms. Historians still argue if it was her, his taster, or just bad luck, and promotes her son Nero to the purple. Now you clutch your laurel crown tight. Nero is a spectacle. The young emperor fancies himself a poet, actor, and charioteer. He fiddles, he sings, he races, while Rome famously burns. Whether he played the lyre while flames consumed the city is debated endlessly, but what's certain is that his building projects after the fire, like the decadent Domus Aurea, are paid with fresh taxes and fresh corpses. One quirky nugget for you. Nero once competed in Greek games, bribing judges so he'd win every race, even when he fell off his chariot. Imagine a king demanding a gold medal while face down in the dust. Only in Rome. Eventually, the Senate and Praetorian Guard have had enough. Nero flees the capital disguised and barefoot, muttering poetic last words before stabbing himself in the throat. With him dies the last of Augustus's bloodline, and Rome's fragile facade cracks wide open. You wipe soot from your sandals, glance back at burned temples rebuilt in marble, and brace for what comes next. The empire, for all its splendor, now stands at the mercy of ambitious generals, mutinous guards, and distant provinces that sniff weakness like wolves scenting a wounded stag. So breathe deep, golden age or not, the shadows lengthen. Rome's greatest strength was always its reinvention. Next time, you'll see how it bleeds and stitches itself back together, emperor by emperor, crisis by crisis. You drift into a Rome bathed in the calm after Nero's flames, where the city's stones hide gossip thicker than its marble columns. With Nero gone, the Senate tries to steer the ship. Good luck with that. 4 emperors will wear the purple in a single year, and you, clever insomniac, will flinch each time the Praetorian Guard changes allegiances overnight for a higher bribe. First comes Galba, a stiff old senator with more wrinkles than charm. He promises a return to discipline and virtue. The legions hate him. He forgets to pay the guard properly. You watch his severed head parade on a pike within months. Next, Otho, suave, ambitious, wearing too much perfume. He fights Vitellius for the throne, loses a battle, then stabs himself rather than drag Rome into more bloodshed. Vitellius waddles in next, gorging on feasts while his supporters loot the treasury. He too finds his head bouncing on the steps before winter's out. Out of this mess rises Vespasian, a gruff, no-nonsense general fresh from crushing Jewish revolts in Judea. He founds the Flavian dynasty and shrugs off the Senate's flattery. Under him, taxes roll in again, Rome's coffers refill, and a monument rises where Nero's golden house once sprawled. You stand in the dusty yard, watching workers lay the foundation stones for the Colosseum, Rome's greatest arena, a place where emperors distract the masses with spectacles so bloody they make the gods look squeamish. One mainstream fact: historians estimate the Colosseum could hold over 50,000 roaring fans, all demanding bread, blood, and circus. Vespasian jokes on his deathbed, "I think I'm becoming a god," and dies smirking at Rome's endless appetite for deifying dead men who once trembled like everyone else. His son Titus inherits the throne, and the worst luck imaginable. Mount Vesuvius erupts in 79 AD, burying Pompeii and Herculaneum in hot ash, while Romans whisper it's a sign the gods are still annoyed about the whole empire thing. You wander Pompeii's streets frozen in time, dogs curled in doorways, bread still in ovens, mosaics gleaming beneath ash. A snapshot of Roman life trapped forever, reminding you that even mighty Rome can't control nature's wrath. Titus handles disasters well enough, throwing games and helping survivors, but dies young and suspiciously convenient for his brother Domitian. Historians still argue whether Titus was poisoned or simply unlucky. Domitian, last of the Flavians, rules with a paranoia so thick you'd need a legion to slice through it. He calls himself Lord and God, stalks hallways suspicious of every senator's whisper, and executes perceived traitors without hesitation. Rome prospers economically under him, roads repaired, frontier forts strengthened. But when his own court plots his murder, few shed tears as his blood stains palace marble. With Domitian's death, the Senate scrambles to choose someone safe. They settle on Nerva, a kindly old man who wisely adopts Trajan, a soldier's emperor, beloved by the legions. Under Trajan, Rome swells to its greatest extent. You follow his armies into Dacia, modern Romania, where golden mines fatten Rome's purse. You watch Roman engineers sketch bridges and fortresses, each stone proof that conquest and construction go hand in hand. One quirky tidbit: during his victory over Dacia, Trajan commissions an enormous column, Trajan's column, spiraling skyward in the Forum, carved with scenes of battles, rivers crossed, and bearded Dacians surrendering. It still stands today, weathered but stubborn, like Rome's ghost carved in marble. Trajan is succeeded by Hadrian, who, unlike his predecessors, reigns in expansion. He's more philosopher than conqueror, prefers walls to new provinces. You shuffle along Hadrian's wall in rainy Britannia, watching damp legionaries grumble about local raiders who slip through anyway. Hadrian tours every province, inspects every garrison, and decorates the empire with temples and libraries. A whisper follows him too, his grief for Antinous, his young Greek lover, who drowns mysteriously in the Nile. Hadrian deifies him, building statues and even founding a city in his name. Historians still argue whether Antinous fell, was sacrificed, or jumped by choice. Either way, love leaves its mark even on emperors carved from stone. Next in line comes Antoninus Pius. Steady, calm, famously dull. If you like your emperors scandal-free. Under him, Rome hums with stability. Then comes Marcus Aurelius, philosopher king, scribbling stoic reflections by lamplight between campaigns along the restless Danube frontier. You feel the wind lash your face as you stand by him at the limes, snow clinging to legion shields while Germanic tribes press the borders. One mainstream fact: Marcus Aurelius' reign is the last of the so-called 5 good emperors. Rome's peak in many historians' eyes, where rulers were chosen for merit, not birthright. A rare trick Rome never quite repeats. But while Marcus ponders virtue, a shadow grows in the east, a plague that kills thousands and rattles the empire's bones. His son Commodus inherits more circus than philosopher, fighting gladiators in the arena like a self-obsessed action hero. Rome watches, half amused, half horrified, as Commodus struts through the Colosseum, slaying animals and boasting he's Hercules reborn. Spoiler, he isn't. He's strangled in his bath by conspirators fed up with his showboating. You stand in the Colosseum's shadow as Rome wonders, if even good emperors can't fix its rot, what comes next? The Pax Romana hums on borrowed time, the legions grumble, and the provinces eye Rome's riches like hungry crows circling a weary lion. So stretch your legs, traveller, because you'll soon march through decades where emperors rise and fall quicker than dawn breaking over 7 hills. And the empire's golden age, it's beginning to tarnish. You pace through marble colonnades littered with whispers and fresh bloodstains. Rome's golden mask slips further with each passing decade. Commodus gone, the Senate scrambles yet again, tossing the purple cloak to Pertinax, an old general who tries to restore order with strict reforms. Too strict, it seems. You flinch as the Praetorian Guard, offended by unpaid promises, hacks him to pieces in his own palace garden. Then comes a moment so absurd it could only happen in Rome. The Praetorian Guard auctions the entire empire to the highest bidder. Didius Julianus, a rich senator, offers the fattest bribe and struts into the palace as emperor. Rome chokes on laughter and horror in equal measure. Soldiers on distant frontiers are not amused. Why risk your neck for an empire sold like a used chariot? So they rally behind real generals. You shadow Septimius Severus, marching from the Danube frontier with battle-hardened legions. He storms into Rome, beheads Julianus, and lectures the Senate about loyalty at spearpoint. He reforms the army, fattens soldiers' pay, and tramples the Senate's pride until it whimpers under his boots. Severus sets the tone for the new imperial reality. Emperors now are soldiers first, politicians a distant second. His sons, Caracalla and Geta, inherit this iron crown. You watch Caracalla murder Geta during a supposed peace meeting. Blood on the palace floor, mother screaming. Caracalla then grants Roman citizenship to nearly every free man in the empire. Historians still argue whether he did it to unite the realm or squeeze more taxes from distant provinces. One quirky tidbit: Caracalla worships Alexander the Great so obsessively that he struts around in Macedonian gear and commissions statues of himself with a suspiciously heroic jawline. He dreams big, but rules cruelly, eventually stabbed to death by his own bodyguard while relieving himself on the roadside. No marble statue for that exit. With Caracalla gone, emperors flicker like candle flames in a windstorm. You trudge behind soldiers who now decide who wears the purple. The Senate pretends to debate, but everyone knows real power rests in camps and frontier fortresses. During this swirl of short-lived rulers, you overhear whispers about a new threat rising from the east: the Sassanid Persians. Fiercer than the old Parthians, they ambush Rome's armies, capture emperors alive. Yes, Valerian ends up stuffed into a Persian skin sack. His fate is so humiliating that Rome simply pretends it didn't happen for centuries. Meanwhile, Rome's borders buckle under constant raids. Goths in the Balkans, Franks along the Rhine, desert tribes in Africa. Plagues sweep through crowded cities, shrinking tax rolls and swelling graveyards. Coins lose silver, people lose faith. You stand in a marketplace where a loaf of bread costs a soldier's weekly pay. One mainstream fact: this chaos is known as the crisis of the 3rd century. Between 235 and 284 AD, Rome racks up at least 26 emperors in 50 years, most dying violently. Some cities even declare breakaway empires, like the Gallic Empire in modern France or the Palmyrene Empire in Syria. You slip through Palmyra's desert streets, watching Queen Zenobia, one of history's most formidable women, rule an independent realm mint coins with her own face, and challenge Roman authority until Aurelian, a rare stabilizing emperor, crushes her rebellion and parades her in golden chains through Rome. Aurelian himself is a whirlwind. He rebuilds walls around Rome. Huge fortifications still stand today, and beats back invaders like swatting flies. His nickname? Restitutor Orbis, restorer of the world. But a suspicious secretary stabs him before he can enjoy retirement. Rome can't help but devour its saviors. Amid all this, the Senate becomes decorative furniture, nice to look at, powerless in reality. Emperors now rise from ranks of soldiers, often born in dusty border towns, fluent in swordplay before rhetoric. Roman citizenship, once a prized badge of Latium pride, becomes so widespread it's almost meaningless. Here's a quirky sign of the times. Some desperate cities resort to hiring entire barbarian tribes to defend them from other barbarians. Friends today, foes tomorrow. An arrangement that feels suspiciously like inviting the wolf to guard the sheep pen. You stand at a crumbling gate, staring out at roads once echoing with Legion March songs, now cluttered with refugees, raiders, and panicked merchants. Yet, somehow, Rome does not fall. It mutates, stitches wounds with fresh emperors, new taxes, fresh gods, and half-forgotten promises of eternal grandeur. Historians still argue whether this relentless survival is due to brilliant generals, a stubborn economy, or sheer luck. Maybe all three. You simply tighten your sandals and keep moving. Because up ahead, a soldier named Diocletian waits, one who will hammer chaos into order with reforms so harsh they make the old republic look like a summer picnic. So steel your spine. The old republic is a ghost. The empire itself is on life support. But the Romans, they're not ready to pack up just yet. You find yourself trudging along a frostbitten Danube outpost, boots caked with mud and debt notices, when word spreads, a new emperor stands ready to weld Rome back together. His name hisses through camps and crumbling forums alike. Diocletian. A career soldier, part bureaucrat, part tyrant, and just ruthless enough to look chaos in the eye and slap it awake. First, he tackles the obvious. No single man can patrol from Britannia's storms to Persia's deserts. So Diocletian splits the empire into east and west, 2 emperors, each with an apprentice called a Caesar. This system is the tetrarchy, the rule of 4. In theory, it stops civil wars by sharing power. In practice, it delays them. Human ambition can't read flowcharts. Historians still argue whether Diocletian's clever plan was a masterstroke or just duct tape on a sinking ship. You shuffle paper alongside sweaty scribes as Diocletian revamps the tax system. Farmers are chained to their plots. Peasants can't flee bad harvests anymore. Prices get fixed by imperial decree. Anyone overcharging risks execution. A loaf of bread now costs the same in Antioch and Gaul. If you can find one, that is. Inflation trembles under the emperor's iron pen, but never quite dies. While Diocletian plugs fiscal holes, he also tries to patch up Rome's soul. You kneel in chilly temples as he launches the empire's fiercest persecution of Christians. Secret gatherings, fish symbols scratched on walls, and prayers whispered behind closed shutters. Soldiers raid house churches. Bishops are hauled before magistrates. Some fold, others die nobly. One mainstream fact. Despite this crackdown, Christianity spreads deeper than ever, its martyrs fueling faith instead of stamping it out. Diocletian retires to his coastal palace in Dalmatia, famously tending cabbages while Rome gnaws at his reforms like rats at dry bread. Power shifts again. You march beside Constantine, a brash general who sees more promise in a cross than a legionary eagle. At the Milvian Bridge, he's outnumbered, outmaneuvered, and yet a dream of a flaming cross inscribed with, "In this sign, conquer changes everything." He wins. The empire bows to his single rule. You wander the newly minted halls of Constantinople, Constantine's answer to decaying Rome. Marble gleams, domes sprout, and Greek merchants hawk spices near freshly laid forums. This new Rome, perched at Europe's hinge with Asia, will outlast its elder sister by 1,000 years. Constantine does more than move capitals. He legalizes Christianity, favors bishops, and convenes councils to hash out thorny debates. Was Christ fully divine, fully human? Both? These questions swirl through candlelit basilicas while old pagan temples slowly empty. You watch priests of Jupiter cast nervous glances at rising church spires. A quirky tidbit for you. Constantine keeps the title of Pontifex Maximus, high priest of the old Roman religion, while promoting the new faith, hedging divine bets, you might say. But his reforms can't halt the tug-of-war for power. Constantine's sons split the empire like spoiled heirs fighting over a grand estate. Civil wars flare up. Cousins stab cousins. Generals switch sides mid-battle. You sip sour wine near the Danube, watching Gothic tribes probe Rome's borders, testing forts that look sturdy but hide half-paid garrisons. Into this swirl steps Julian the Apostate, Constantine's nephew. Raised Christian, he flips the script, tries to revive old pagan rituals, sacrifices bulls, and lectures philosophers about lost Roman virtues. He wins admiration from pagans and polite applause from scholars, but can't turn back the tide. He dies in Persia, allegedly whispering, "You have won, Galilean," a nod to the Nazarene faith that refused to die. Historians still argue whether he was a visionary or a footnote to inevitable Christian dominance. Meanwhile, the empire's edges fray like an old cloak. You stand by Hadrian's wall, watching Picts swarm over mossy stones. In the Balkans, Gothic tribes push deeper, running from something worse behind them, the Huns. These nomadic horse archers ride like thunder, herding weaker tribes before them. Rome's old frontier lines buckle like cheap fence posts in a hurricane. Yet the East, rich, Greek-speaking, with bustling cities and fat tax rolls, keeps itself mostly afloat while the Latin West staggers. Constantinople's walls rise ever higher. Its bureaucracy thickens like stew left to simmer too long, and emperors there wear silken robes while their Western cousins beg for loans to pay mercenaries. One mainstream fact: Diocletian's split, though born of desperation, marks the final fracture. Two Romes, one declining, one reinventing itself as Byzantium. You rub tired eyes, staring out at the same roads Roman engineers once carved through forests and deserts. Now, they carry more refugees than soldiers, more prayers than war songs. But don't dare assume Rome's tale is done. In the West, death approaches in furs and iron. In the East, marble mosaics wait to glitter for centuries yet. So tug your cloak tighter and press forward. Goths, Vandals, and Attila, the Hun, are about to knock at the last gates, demanding an empire's final tribute. You stand on a crumbling wall in northern Gaul, peering into a fog that hides more than it reveals. Somewhere out there, the Rhine frontier, once guarded by proud legions, has dissolved into rumour. Beyond it, hungry tribes gather. Goths, Vandals, Franks, pushed westward by a nightmare galloping behind them, the Huns. In Rome's glory days, a legion's eagle standard meant invincible authority. Now it's pawned for gold to pay mercenaries who may switch sides by sundown. You share cold rations with nervous soldiers, many no longer Roman by blood, but sworn to fight Rome's battles for the right to settle on its tired soil. One mainstream fact: in 376 AD, the Goths asked to cross the Danube, begging for sanctuary from the Huns. Rome, too weak to refuse, allows it, then treats them like cattle, starving them, cheating them, demanding bribes for dog meat. Predictably, betrayal ignites rebellion. You watch the Goths, once refugees, become conquerors overnight. At Adrianople, in 378 AD, you crouch behind battered shields as Gothic cavalry smashes a Roman army so thoroughly that the Emperor Valens burns inside a farmhouse with his shredded pride. Historians still argue whether this loss signaled the beginning of the West's end or merely exposed rot festering for centuries. In the East, the Byzantine half survives. Resource-rich, well-defended Constantinople stands tall behind its triple walls. In the West, emperors become puppets dangled by generals or barbarian warlords with Roman titles. You flinch as Stilicho, half Roman, half barbarian, holds the Western army together by sheer stubbornness until court intrigues have him executed for treason. The legions crumble with him. Then comes Alaric, the Gothic king who once fought for Rome but was cheated too many times. He demands land and respect. Rome shrugs, so he marches south, crosses rivers Rome once controlled with iron discipline, and camps outside the Eternal City's gates. The Senate pleads, prays, and bribes. It works until it doesn't. In 410 AD, you watch horrified Romans fling open the gates as starving citizens betray the walls for bread. Alaric's men swarm the streets. The Visigoths sack Rome. For 3 days, fire crackles where senators once debated eternity. Churches stand mostly untouched. Alaric, ironically Christian, spares them. But the message is clear. Rome is no longer invincible. One quirky tidbit: Alaric dies soon after the sack. Legend says his followers bury him with his treasure under a riverbed, then slaughter the slaves who dug the channel, so no living soul knows the tomb's location. Raiders with a flair for drama. The Western Empire staggers on, more ghost than government. You follow imperial courts shuffling from city to city, Ravenna here, Mediolanum there, hoping marshes or mountains will protect what legions no longer can. New barbarian confederations rise within Rome's bones. Visigoths in Spain, Vandals in North Africa. The Vandals, those mischievous plunderers, sail from Carthage and loot Rome again in 455 AD, stripping her statues, temples, and treasury bare. To this day, vandalism bears their name. Never underestimate branding. Meanwhile, in the east, Byzantine emperors sip wine in gilded halls, paying barbarian tribes to attack each other rather than Constantinople. You slip through their marble corridors, where bureaucrats copy tax records with the same diligence Romans once carved roads through forests. Back west, one last ghost flickers. Majorian, a noble-hearted general who tries to rebuild fleets, drive out Vandals, and restore Roman dignity. His own officers betray him, shave his head, and execute him like a common bandit. By then, the Senate's once mighty voice squeaks from dusty corners. Real power belongs to generals and barbarian kings cloaked in Roman titles. One final push comes from a man whose name still makes children's eyes widen: Attila the Hun. You stand on muddy plains in Gaul, watching a coalition of Romans and Goths clash with Attila's horde at the Catalonian fields. The battle is inconclusive, but the damage is done. Attila retreats. Europe sighs in relief, only for him to die soon after, allegedly from a nosebleed on his wedding night. Historians still argue whether it was a drunken accident or an assassin's hand. By 476 AD, you sit beside Romulus Augustus, the pitiful last emperor of the West. Barely a teenager, signing his own abdication under the stern gaze of Odoacer, a Germanic general tired of pretending Rome rules anything at all. No riots, no thunder from heaven. Just a whimper. Odoacer calls himself King of Italy and sends Rome's imperial regalia to the Eastern Emperor as a polite thanks. But we're good. One mainstream fact: historians mark 476 as the fall of Rome. But if you listen closely, you hear a heartbeat still echoing in law codes, cathedrals, and languages. The West may be fractured, but its idea, Rome, won't vanish so easily. So pull your tattered cloak tight. The Western Empire lies in ruins, yet across the Aegean, Constantinople's domes glint under the sun, promising that this story isn't done. It's merely changing costume for the next act. You stand in a sunlit square of Constantinople, watching silk merchants haggle beside marble fountains. The Western Empire might be a memory whispered among ruined villas, but here in the East, this is the real Rome now. They call themselves Romaioi, Romans in Greek tongue, and under golden mosaics, they believe it with all their taxed, incense-scented hearts. After the fall of the West, the Eastern Roman Empire, soon known as Byzantium to everyone except its own people, becomes a fortress of survival. Its emperors wear purple boots, and sleep-knowing conspirators sharpen knives under moonlight, same as ever. But these emperors wield intrigue, like a gladiator wields a gladius. They buy peace when steel won't work, bribe enemies, and pit rival tribes against each other. One mainstream fact: Justinian the Great, ruling in the 6th century, dreams bigger than anyone since Augustus. He wants to reunite the whole empire, Latin West and Greek East, under one dome of law and faith. You follow his armies as Belisarius, a general so loyal it seems fictional, reconquers North Africa and Italy. Ravenna's mosaics glitter once more under Roman eagles. But dreams have a price. While the city celebrates victory, the plague of Justinian sweeps Constantinople. Some say killing half the population in sweltering alleyways where monks pray and grave diggers drop from exhaustion. You step carefully among funeral carts, wondering if empires can survive when bodies pile higher than gold reserves. Yet Byzantium persists. Justinian codifies Roman law. His corpus juris civilis shapes European legal systems for centuries. Hagia Sophia rises under his rule too. You crane your neck in that vast dome where mosaics flicker like captured stars. After Justinian, emperors wobble between crisis and brilliance. Some rule wisely, patching walls and minting coins. Others vanish in palace coups faster than tavern rumors spread. The empire fends off Avars, Persians, and later Arabs sweeping from Arabia's sands. Islam's rise slices huge chunks off Roman Asia and Africa. Constantinople itself holds firm behind Theodosian walls, so thick even cannons centuries later will weep trying to breach them. You drift through smoky basilicas where debates roar, icons or no icons. The iconoclast controversy shakes Byzantium for over a century. Emperors destroy sacred images, monks hide them in caves, people riot in streets. Historians still argue whether this was pious reform or power play to break monks' influence. Either way, the faith emerges battered but more unified. Outside the palace, Byzantine life swirls. Charioteers still duel in the hippodrome. Scholars preserve Greek classics while the West fumbles with barbarian script. Silkworms are smuggled from China, and suddenly Byzantium produces its own shimmering cloth. An imperial monopoly that funds more walls, more spies, more intrigue. One quirky tidbit for your sleepy mind. Court eunuchs, castrated young, to serve without dynastic ambition, become some of the most powerful men in the empire. Some even command armies. Imagine a marble hall where armored eunuchs plot with generals against traitorous dukes. Byzantium loves irony. Centuries roll on. Basil II, the Bulgar slayer, emerges. You stand by him as he crushes the Bulgarian Empire, blinds thousands of enemy prisoners, and sends them back to their Tsar in rows of one-eyed men. Brutal, yes, but the Balkans obey Rome once more. Yet the empire never finds lasting peace. Crusaders, called by the Pope to fight Muslims, turn greedy eyes toward Constantinople's riches. In 1204, you recoil as armoured knights. Supposed defenders of Christendom loot the city they vowed to protect. Churches are ransacked, holy relics sold like carnival trinkets. For decades, a Latin puppet state rules the ashes until a scrappy emperor retakes the throne. But the old empire is hollow now. Provinces lost, tax base shriveled, enemies encircling. The final blow comes from the Turks. You stand on Constantinople's walls in 1453, cannon booming through the dawn mist, as young Sultan Mehmed II's army hammers ancient stones. After weeks of thunder and prayer, the last emperor, Constantine XI, dies sword in hand amid falling banners. One mainstream fact: the fall of Constantinople ends the Eastern Roman Empire after nearly 1,000 extra years of borrowed time. But its art, theology, and legal traditions ripple westward. Italian scholars snatch up Greek manuscripts, fueling the Renaissance. You watch refugees scatter to Venice, to Moscow, which starts calling itself the Third Rome, to anywhere Rome's dream might find a fresh heartbeat. Byzantium's bones sink into the Bosporus, but its spirit keeps haunting cathedrals, courtrooms, and bookshelves across continents. So breathe deep. The last imperial walls have fallen, but a certain stubborn idea refuses to die. You're not done walking yet. Ahead lies the ruins, the rebirths, and the quiet echo of Rome's ghost in every parliament and columned courthouse still standing. You brush ash off your sleeves as dawn breaks over a Europe that pretends it's moved on. But everywhere you turn, Rome's fingerprints stain the map. The empire's walls may lie in shards from Hadrian's misty frontier to Constantinople's battered gates, yet its bones survive in unexpected ways, stitched into kingdoms, crowned in cathedrals, mumbled in court oaths, and lurking in languages that still wrap mouths in Latin echoes. As the Middle Ages shuffle in, every upstart king in Europe clutches for Rome's old cloak. The Pope in Rome itself spins moral authority from St. Peter's bones, declaring that only he can crown emperors in the West. Enter Charlemagne, Charles the Great, who swears to be a new Caesar for the Franks. You stand beside him on Christmas Day, 800 AD, as Pope Leo III places a crown on his shaggy head in St. Peter's Basilica. Holy Roman Emperor, they declare. Never mind the real Rome's dust. Power is about symbolism now. One mainstream fact: this Holy Roman Empire, neither holy, Roman, nor an empire in any classical sense, limps along for 1,000 years, until Napoleon sweeps it aside like stale breadcrumbs. Historians still argue whether it preserved Rome's spirit or just wore its name like a stolen cape. Meanwhile, Roman law, the old jurist scrolls carefully copied by monks, becomes the backbone of Europe's legal systems. When medieval barons squabble or townsfolk sue over property lines, they cite principles first debated under Caesar and codified by Justinian. Even in chaos, Rome's lawyers get the last word. You drift through monasteries where tired monks scratch quills across parchment. preserving Virgil, Ovid, and Tacitus for generations who barely remember marble forums and imperial purple. Out in the muddy fields, peasants plant wheat in straight rows, harvest it with tools improved by Roman design, and pay taxes that echo the old tribute lists, just with more fleas and less Latin. Every so often, someone tries to resurrect Rome outright. You lean on stone battlements in 1453 as Mehmed II's Ottomans boast their Caesari rum, Caesars of Rome, inheritors by conquest. In Moscow, Tsars mutter about being the third Rome, claiming that where old and Byzantium fell, Russia stands eternal. Even fascist regimes centuries later will borrow the eagle standard, the laurel wreath, the fasces. Rome's symbols endure because ambition never tires of ancient glamour. One quirky fact: the Roman calendar, tinkered by Caesar, polished by Augustus, still tells you what day it is. July and August carry their names like hidden statues in your pocket. You, living centuries away, owe your weekdays and leap years to these long-dead emperors arguing with priests about solstices. Walk any European city and you'll stub your toe on Roman stones, arches supporting highways, baths turned museums, aqueducts still trickling fresh water. Some towns claim a direct line: Trier, Cologne, York. Even London bears scars where legionaries once patrolled foggy streets. Beyond Europe, Rome's legacy mutates. America's founders nod to the Senate, the Republic, checks and balances. Their Capitol dome mimics Pantheon curves. Their currency whispers Latin mottos nobody translates at dinner. Historians still argue whether this modern Rome learned anything from the original's collapse, or just repeats the cycle with shinier marble and better roads. Even language won't stay dead. Latin, the tongue of old senators, persists as French love poetry, Spanish curses, Italian lullabies, and Portuguese ballads echoing through Brazilian forests. English, too, hoards Roman words like stolen treasure: justice, forum, maximum, data. If you listen carefully, you can hear togas rustle behind modern syllables. In churches, priests chant prayers shaped by Augustine and Aquinas, men who bent Roman rhetoric to bind faith and empire tighter than marble ever could. The cross that once struggled in catacombs now crowns capitals, carried by missionaries to far coasts where Rome never planted eagles, but its idea still conquers minds. And you, time-weary traveller, stand in all this rubble and revival, feeling the empire's heartbeat echo through history's cracked pavement. Rome never truly dies. It infects every power that touches its ghost. From senator to soldier, from pope to president, someone is always whispering, "Remember Rome." So draw your cloak closer. Ahead lies one final breath, one last glimpse at how this empire, dead yet undying, comforts and haunts every civilization that claims to build something eternal. You stand now on a quiet hill. Maybe it's Palatine. Maybe it's any forgotten ruin where weeds crack marble and tourists pose for selfies beside headless statues. You feel it in the stone, the hush that comes when an empire finally exhales. But its ghosts refuse to quit whispering. In your pocket rattles every coin stamped with an emperor's stern nose. You trace the image of Augustus, Trajan, Constantine. Flesh long gone, but his laws, language, and ambitions cling to you like dusk clings to an old olive grove. Rome, more than marble and legions, is an idea that every king, republic, and revolutionary since has either stolen or sworn to surpass. As modern Europe stumbles through Enlightenment, revolution, and 2 world wars, Rome's echo stays. Mussolini drapes himself in Roman slogans to stir crowds with fascist dreams of a second empire. In Berlin, eagles and straight-armed salutes ape Caesar's legionnaires. In Washington, D.C., the Senate convenes beneath a dome no Roman would mistake for foreign, because they built the blueprint. Cross oceans, and you find Roman fingerprints on roads and civil codes in Africa, cathedrals crowned with Latin crosses in South America, and old Roman gods hiding behind saints and festival days. Farmers plough straight furrows, city planners lay out grids, engineers debate arches and domes, all descendants of Vitruvius scribbling geometry for Caesar's builders. One mainstream fact: over 2,000 years after its founding myth of wolf and twins, Rome's population dips below the peaks of the empire, but still teems with life. It's a living museum where teenagers smoke by ruined forums and priests light candles beneath domes once echoing with senators' bribes. Your boots scrape the stones of the Via Appia, an old Roman road where chariots once rattled, where St. Peter might have fled, and where pilgrims still walk to touch time. Look around. Every weed between the stones proves nature never asks permission to reclaim glory. Historians still argue if we stand on Rome's corpse or its foundations. Maybe it's both. Here's a final quirky truth. Somewhere, some lonely archivist is cataloguing yet another Latin manuscript, proving that no empire truly dies if its stories still breathe ink into fresh parchment. You stand still now. Listen. Beyond the hum of scooters or the hush of traffic circling Rome's 7 hills, you catch a whisper. Senatus populusque Romanus. The Senate and people of Rome. Not gone. Not forgotten. Just murmured by a billion lips who never voted in that Senate, but keep its echo alive each time they speak words older than their flags. So rest now. You have marched every muddy trench, watched Caesar rise and bleed, trailed emperors from marble halls to monastery scriptoriums. You have seen senators become shadows and legions become legends. Rome is dead. Long live Rome. Inside you, around you, stubborn as myth and as soft as prayer. Now take a slow, deep breath. Feel the weight of centuries lift off your shoulders, like a dusty cloak dropped to the mosaic floor of a forgotten basilica. Let the roar of chariots fade, the clash of legion shields grow distant until all that remains is a quiet heartbeat. The same rhythm that carried this empire from wolf's milk to marble, from pagan temple to candlelit chapel. Picture the last Roman sunrise you've witnessed tonight. A pale dawn spilling over broken arches, olive trees nodding in the soft breeze, and a single stray cat curling up beside a statue that no longer remembers its emperor's name. You stand at the edge of it all, past and present blurring, as gentle as a hush within a cathedral at dusk. There is no hurry here, no senators to please, no legions to rally. Just your breath, the echo of old Latin words, and a comforting sense that even when marble crumbles, stories do not. They rest patiently in our books, our languages, our cities, waiting to remind us that we, too, are chapters in something bigger than ourselves. So tonight, sleep easy, knowing you have walked through the dust and gold of an empire that will never truly vanish. Let your thoughts drift like incense over ancient altars, soothing you into dreams where Rome's timeless streets welcome you back, stone by stone, whisper by whisper. Good night, traveller. May your sleep be peaceful under the watch of 1,000 Roman stars.